Well, the time is now 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, so we are going to go ahead and kick things off for today's webinar. First off, I want to thank you so much for joining us here today. My name is Jen Peachman. I am the Vice President of Member Engagement here at the Mortgage Collaborative. I am really excited today to offer today's webinar in conjunction with our friends over at LendingQB. First off, I want to welcome all the members of the Mortgage Collaborative to today's call. And for those of you who've joined us today that might not be too familiar about what the Mortgage Collaborative is or we're all about, I wanted to take a few minutes here today to just provide you a quick overview about the benefits of membership with the Mortgage Collaborative. I'm also going to spend some time running through a few housekeeping items before I turn it over to LendingQB. So as you are connecting into today's webinar, you will notice your lines have been muted. That's only to eliminate any background noise. We want to make sure that everyone that's joining us today can hear things very clearly. If you have any questions during today's webinar for either myself or LendingQB, you can submit them right in the questions section right through the GoToWebinar. So before I go ahead and turn it over and introduce our friends at LendingQB, I wanted to share some information about the Mortgage Collaborative. We are a quickly growing network of lender members and preferred partners, a cooperative network supporting the mortgage industry. We've really built on an excellent platform, and best of all, it was built by lenders for our lender members. TMC is providing financial, strategic, and educational and networking value for our lender members in a number of ways and for an incredibly low cost of membership. Our network now boasts over 130 lenders across the nation, collectively originating over $200 billion annually, which has really allowed us to expand our vendor partnerships and to include over 60 plus best-in-class preferred partners. And with preferred partners like LendingQB inside of our network, we can really collaborate with our partners to offer educational webinars just like this one as part of the value of membership here at the Mortgage Collaborative. So a lot of folks may ask, why TMC? Why the Mortgage Collaborative? Well, I'd love to share some more information with you about the benefits of membership with TMC. We are the nation's only independent cooperative network in the industry, which really, I think, sets us apart. Our mission is pretty simple. We're only focused on the growth and profitability of our independent mortgage bankers and community lenders. And with some pretty impressive initiatives that we rolled out, including our collaboration lab, TMC Direct, and our monthly benchmarking solution, TMC Benchmark, your organization is sure to benefit by joining. And one of the biggest benefits of membership, I would say, is the opportunity to join our unique and collaborative biannual conferences. The Power of the Network is headed to Chicago this August. So if you're interested in learning more, visit our website, mortgagecollaborative.com, or give me a shout out. I'm happy to share some information with you. So that's it on TMC. If you've just joined us, again, thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. I'm really excited to introduce you to Linn Cook, our friend over at LendingQB. So good morning, good afternoon, Linn. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you so much, Jen.
Oh, thank you so much for putting this on for our members and your customers as well. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Linn.
All right. Thank you very much. And as you guys know, LendingQB, we are a very strong supporter of the Mortgage Collaborative. We've been involved with the Mortgage Collaborative for at least 2 years now. So, any of our clients, any other lenders that are on this call, I definitely do recommend that you guys get more information about the Mortgage Collaborative if you're not a member already. Okay. So I want to talk about today what we promoted this as a modular concept on LOS technology and software. And as you can see here, I've titled this The Master of None. And you'll see why I did use this title. It's very relevant to what we're talking about today. Okay, so let's start here. I think everyone on this call in this webinar knows that mortgage lending is very, very complicated. Is it more complicated than it needs to be? Probably. But nevertheless, we know that there are a lot of different moving parts, some that are necessary, a lot maybe that are not so necessary. But at the end of the day, we all have to live with it. Okay, so mortgage lending is very complicated, and we know this. Being a provider of LOS software obviously gives us a lot of good insight into the way that mortgage lenders actually operate. And we know that within our product itself, we've constructed at least 30 different types of roles that our users can assign to their own employees. So we know there are a lot of different people, there are a lot of different moving parts within it. And it all comes down to, as you know, everyone keeps telling us, is it comes down to process. And from a process standpoint, we know that, you know, mortgage lending from a process standpoint is very, very complicated as well. You know, if you look at this, we have constructed, at least within our software, right, that there are at least 50 different types of loan statuses or different stages that a loan goes through. So again, you know, a really good sort of demonstration of how complex mortgage lending is. And as a result, what are we seeing? You know, with so many different people and so many different processes. What we see, you know, on average is, you know, thanks to our friends over at Ellie Mae, you know, their monthly indicator report shows that on average, it's taking more than 40 days to close a loan. Okay. And, you know, I think all of us are always very curious to see, you know, how can we improve this process? What is it about mortgage lending that makes it so complicated and creates this time delay, right? Because borrowers, homeowners, they want to get their loans as quickly as possible. So we can take some reference from different industries to really understand what are possibly some key areas that mortgage lenders could actually improve their process or improve the way that they do things and make it much faster to close a loan. So let's take a look at another industry, okay? Let's take a look at the automotive industry. So, you know, creating a mortgage loan is complicated, but building a car, that's also complicated too. And, you know, we know that, you know, building a car is not only complicated, but there are also a lot of different parts. You know, any given car has more than 30,000 different parts. And these parts can be sourced from over 4,000 different manufacturers. So if we think that creating a mortgage loan is complicated, you know, think about building a car in and of itself. And when you think about all the people that it takes to build a car, well, you know, I think in days past, yeah, there were a lot of people involved. But today, you know, there may be anywhere between 15 and 30 different individuals that work on a single car. And that's thanks to, you know, a lot of robots. I mean, I think you could have argued that there were probably, you know, 50 plus people that used to work on a car today. Robots and automation have really helped out with that process and reduced the number of individuals. But it doesn't reduce the number of parts. It doesn't reduce necessarily the number of steps. It's still very difficult to build a car. So comparatively, you've got two very complicated processes, mortgage lending and building a car. Mortgage lending, as we said, it takes about, you know, 40 plus days to manufacture a mortgage note. Well, with a car, it only takes them 5 to 8 days. Okay, so you look at these two comparative processes and you ask yourself, well, why is a mortgage note so much more difficult to manufacture than a car? What is it about mortgage lending in particular that makes it so complicated? Now, we can think of a lot of different reasons. We can come up with all these different excuses, and I'm not going to get into that. You know, obviously we are a software vendor. We're an LOS software provider. And so we're going to look at it, you know, from our perspective, from what we've learned and what we've seen within this industry. And what we see right now, from our perspective, is that the LOS system is a monolith, right? You look at any given mortgage LOS system out there, and today there are approximately 40 different LOS systems that are out there that are somewhat commercially available. And they're all constructed in exactly the same way. Okay, it's a single system that every person within the organization uses to control the entire lending process, right? So we've encapsulated every single role, every single process within a single software system. Now, this is a very traditional approach to system design. I don't think that this is unique within just the mortgage industry. You look at any other industry and the computer systems that they use, it's a very similar situation where it's a single system that's been built to encapsulate every single role. And, you know, as a result, it is sort of a one-size-fits-all type of system, okay? And that's not to say it's bad, right? I mean, I think it's fair to say that it's very efficient from a software design and management standpoint, right? Just to build one single system on top of a single database platform, right? And it's very efficient, certainly for the software vendor, right? For us as a software vendor, if we just had one system that we're constantly building, upgrading, maintaining, makes it a lot easier for us. But what about users, right? That's the question we have to ask ourselves, right? What sort of trade-offs do you as lenders and as end users of software, what trade-offs do you have to make to be able to work within this monolithic LOS software environment? And so, at the end of the day, it's one system. Well, all users are forced to use the same UI, right? And that a single UI, it has to be designed to satisfy all these different roles. So these concessions, right, have to be made for the sake of keeping everyone in one system. And what are those concessions? Well, I mean, potentially it could be usability, right? The overall UI and UX of the actual software platform itself. It could be system performance, right? Trying to mash all these different sort of roles and calculations and fields and whatnot into a single system could impact the actual performance of the system. And functionality. I mean, it may limit the functionality of any given system. I mean, if you think about it, as a computerized system, is it really designed optimally for everyone to use a single platform? And that's why we look at this traditional approach to building an LOS as a monolithic piece of software, really as more of a jack of all trades and master of none, right? I mean, it has to do so many different things and that it ends up giving the end user an experience that really just isn't as ideal as it could possibly be for each of those individual users. So let me give you an example, okay? And I'm going to give you an example of LendingQB itself. So here's one of our screens, and this is what the loan officer, as a role, sees when they use our software. Now I'm going to switch over to a completely different view. This is what the processor sees. Wow. Completely different, isn't it? Right? So you can see loan officer, processor. Now let's look at underwriters. Okay. So hopefully you get what I'm saying, right? When you look at the UI, and I'm not going to make any sort of judgment on our UI, okay? But I'm saying as any given monolithic type of LOS software, you can see that everyone's going to see everything in the same exact manner. And the question for each of these users, whether it's a loan officer, processor, or underwriter, is this the most ideal way for them to view and use our system? The question really is, if everybody does a different job, why are they using the same exact software, the same exact UI? Well, to kind of answer that question and really bring up this whole concept of modularity into context, let's go back to the auto industry, right? Let's look at the most successful, largest automobile manufacturer in the world, right? Today, it is Toyota, okay? And Toyota kind of had the same concept, right? They said, if everyone's doing a different job, why are they all provided with the same tools, the same sort of layout that they use to kind of build that car? Why can't we make it better? And so they came up with this whole concept known as Kaizen. And I know that many of you already know what this is, right? This is the quote unquote Toyota way or Toyota quality management, where they're saying that let's change our process for the good of the overall process, right? And they say that, one of their edicts is, the right process produces the right results, okay? And getting to that right process, how do you define the right process? From the Kaizen, the Toyota philosophy, it's all about eliminating waste, right? They looked at their process and they saw a lot of waste within the entire process itself. And they said, if we can extract that waste out of the process, we can do good to the overall process. We can do good to the product, okay? And so they called, that Japanese word for waste was muda. Okay, and so in their world, they saw these wastes as being things like overproduction, reworking things, reworking processes, wasting of time, making people wait for a certain process to finish before they can begin their process, waste in inventory, right, and waste in actual physical motion. Okay, now looking at this list of different types of waste, what you'll notice is that these areas, overproduction, rework, time, and inventory, and there are other types of waste. It kind of varies based on the industry. But overall, when you think about a process and you think about these different types of waste, these are really sort of big picture overall process improvement from an organizational standpoint. How can we change things within, our overall process to, reduce or eliminate waste in these particular areas. And that's when you bring in these continuous improvement process consultants, right? Guys like this, right? And no knock on any of you guys if you are Six Sigma Black Belt. I mean, that's a very proud title to have. But, again, these are big picture things, right? These are things that really kind of fall outside of what we do as sort of tool manufacturers, right? We're software guys. So these are guys that you wouldn't hire us to do, okay? But when we look at motion is more of an individual user sort of process improvement, as opposed to the big picture, let's rework, the overall structure of the management and oversight and QA and QC. Here in motion, we're able to isolate on a single user. And motion can take the many different forms. Within a physical sort of process, such as building a car, motion is more about, eliminating those wasted physical movements, more along the lines of ergonomics. So if we look at this picture, here is a standard production line for an automobile manufacturer. Okay, and you can see these two guys, and they're working on the engine, and it looks like something along the lines of putting the overall engine into the overall body of the car and attaching it to the chassis. What's interesting here is, there's a whole bunch of process overall that we can't see. That these smart guys that are Six Sigma, they've already worked on. But the area that you'll notice is in these yellow boxes. You'll notice they have these little blue bins that are situated in a very strategic area, right? They've got these blue bins situated in a way such that they can turn around very quickly to grab the parts of the tools that they need and then turn around and affix it to the part of the car that they're actually working on. And in fact, they've set them up as specific bins so that the user knows exactly where that particular part, where that particular tool actually is, instead of having to shuffle around and kind of find what it is. I mean, those are all the wasted motions that translate into wasted time, okay, that overall translate into wasted processes. So if we were to translate this into more of the LOS world, more of the computer, desktop world, the question is not how easy is it to find the tool or the part that you need to work on. The question more becomes of how easy is it for you to find the information you need on a given computer screen. I'm sure we've all experienced those moments where, it just, we're wasting time trying to find something, right? Especially within an LOS. An LOS itself has well over 1,000, probably close to 10,000 different fields that contain data. And, we as LOS manufacturers, we have to organize those fields on the screen in a particular way. But with that volume of information that needs to be sought out, it can be very difficult, even with some level of organization of those screens. If you look at this poor guy, he's got 6 screens and 3 different computers that he has to work on, right? I mean, they've isolated him so much that he's not even allowed to put anything on his walls, right? He has to just focus on his screens. This is not really ideal, right? I mean, the amount of time he has to spend trying to find the information he needs across so many different screens is not really ideal necessarily. So from an ergonomic standpoint, you can look at physical ergonomics from what we saw before from these guys working on the assembly line. It physical ergonomics really translates into UI and UX, right? UI meaning, user interface, and UX meaning the overall user experience. And from that, if automobile manufacturers can specialize their process and segment in such a way so it's easier physically for their workers to find the tools that they need to do to complete their job, we can do the same thing with an LOS. And that's where we came up with sort of this concept of modularity, right? Where we break apart that monolithic LOS and we segment it into each of these specific job roles, right? And we do that by building very specific UI and UXs for that given role. So here's an example. Remember, this is what we saw before, right? This is the monolithic view of our actual LOS itself. Here is something that we recently introduced, which we call Originator QB. This is a modular view, basically of the same exact system, okay? Again, here's the monolithic view. Here's the modular view. Now, aesthetics aside, you can see that there's a lot more simplification of the UI and the UX that was done. If you take a look, along the left-hand side, these two gray areas, this is the navigation menu within our monolithic view of our LOS. And so this is how we organized all the different data fields in our LOS in a way that hopefully was able to help our users find the specific screen and the specific field that they want, that they need to either enter in or change information on. And what you're seeing on the very left-hand side here, this is just the folders, right? As you can see, we organize it in sort of a tree format. The middle shows you what happens when you actually expand just one of these folders, what we call the loan application folder. And you can see within just that loan application folder itself, there are well over 20 different screens. This is where you get that waste of motion, that waste of sort of visual ergonomics, because, you have to look through, a list of very small font to find first the section that you want, and then within that section, find the screen that contains the field that you're looking for. It's become so big that, as you can see, we've even included a search bar, even within our navigation menu. That's how sort of complex it can be to find the specific data that you're looking for. Now, if you look over here, what we call the modular sort of format, this is just for the originator. What we've done is we've stripped out all of these different organizations, all of these different screens, and we've just filtered it down just to the views and the different screens that only the loan officer, the originator, needs to see. And as you can see, it's about 11, 12 different screens. It's much better than what you see in this monolithic view. So this concept of modularity really is about creating specialized UI and UX for every role in the mortgage process, not just the loan officer. So whether you're the originator, the processor, the underwriter, secondary closing, it's about creating a specific UI UX environment for each of those individuals and doing exactly what we did here for the originator for all those roles. Focusing what they need to see, focusing the information on the screen in a way that makes it easier for them to be able to access that information. So what we're saying is that, look, provide the right tool for the right job. And, what's interesting is that we're now moving into a phase of computer software development that makes this really possible. So when you think about this whole concept of Kaizen within a computer application environment, it is about A, segmenting your overall system into job-specific roles. B, eliminating unnecessary functions and on-screen items to make it easier for the individual to be able to identify and access the information they need much more quickly. And C, to promote really better mental ergonomics, right? And those mental ergonomics are going to contribute to a better process. So when we think about ergonomics, again, in this sort of area of computer design, it really comes down to, like I said, UI, UX. And I want to take a little bit of time to kind of explain the difference because, people are always combining UI, UX as sort of one term, but they are separate. They're different. I'm going to do it reverse. If we talk about UX or user experience design, that is more the technical side of things, right? That's where someone is going in and doing the research and understanding, how long it takes for a given individual to navigate from one place to another place and find the information that they need. So it's a very technical sort of skill, and it is about overall usability. And it's addressing a given user's intellectual response to using a piece of software, whereas the user interface side, that is the more creative side of things, right? That is the graphic design side of things. That's creating some amount of pleasure, right, out of using a computer software, if that's even possible, right? And it is, right? I mean, as users of LOS software yourself, I mean, you'll know when something is pleasurable or more likely unpleasurable when you're using a piece of software, right? People get frustrated and want to put their hand through the computer screen all the time, right? So UI really addresses that emotional response to a piece of software. And combining the two together, that's what creates that overall user experience or that user impression of using a piece of software. So if we could apply these concepts of Kaizen, specifically the motion concept of Kaizen, to software, what you get is basically this, what you see in the automotive world, right? You get specialization. These are all trucks produced by Toyota, but as you can see, one is a pickup, one is designed, for the mom with the 6 kids, the other is designed for the parents with the newborn, whatever it is, right? It is addressing a specific user-specific needs and developing a line of products that addresses each of those needs. The same thing can be done with an LOS, okay? And so you would imagine, if an LOS vendor was able to actually do that, right, to build an LOS with these role-specific modules, what you would achieve as a mortgage lender would really be nirvana, right? This is the ultimate LOS software. This is what is really providing us that capability to improve our processes and to make the system more pleasurable, make your employees happier to work, as happy as they could possibly be, but more likely not frustrating them. Okay, so modularity really is about this whole concept of trying to achieve some greater sense of of nirvana within your LOS software, which is sort of this unicorn that people are always looking for. But as we've kind of gone down this path of understanding that you can build these sort of separate modules out, what we're learning as we're talking to more lenders is that that's not enough. Okay, that's going to address a certain percentage of lenders, but ultimately, if we go back to this car concept, sure, we've developed this modular version, right? Here's a specific type of truck that was built to satisfy a very particular need. But what lenders, especially larger lenders, want, instead of this, what they actually want is they want this. They want a highly specialized, highly customized module for themselves to be able to use. This is, believe it or not, this is a Toyota Tundra, right? That's been outfitted with a 50 caliber gun and a bunch of weird military devices. Whatever the case may be, it's each lender has a specific workflow, has a specific way that they work. And by what they want to do is they want to leverage this type of customization to really enhance the overall process. Even beyond just a straight up modular concept that's been provided to them by their vendor, right? They want full control to create their own environment. And that's why you can now extend modularity, right, beyond just a given module. You can extend it using APIs, right? Now, I know people have been talking about APIs for a couple of years now, primarily from the aspect of integrating different systems with each other. And then that's very relevant. I mean, APIs are sort of the name of the game right now for that type of thing in terms of bolting on some type of a service to the LOS to make it easier to be able to communicate with an external service and perform specific functions. But what we're saying about LOS is that, about APIs is that you can go beyond APIs in terms of just integrating third-party software, right? What you can use APIs for is now you can actually build your own LOS, right? Because we know all lenders want to build their own LOS. All lenders actually know what the perfect LOS looks like. If you put 10 lenders in a room and tell us what your perfect LOS looks like, if you were to build it, what it would look like, you would end up with 10 different looking LOSs. Okay, and so how can you achieve that? From our standpoint as a vendor of LOS software, we don't want to go out and build custom versions of our software for every single client that we have. That's just not achievable from a cost standpoint. But APIs really do let you do that, right? And not only do they let you do that in terms of building your own LOS, but you can do it with less money, less resources, and less risk. That is really the transformative nature of APIs, that you could actually really build your own LOS. So if you take a look at sort of this modular concept and extend that out using APIs so that each of these modules now has an API that enables a lender to come in and actually build their own custom module, then you get basically the building blocks to build your own LOS. And what we mean by less money and less resource and less risk is that, look, we as a software vendor, now what we can do is we can just focus on just the core of the LOS, right? And that core meaning the database architecture, the security infrastructure, all the integrations for different service providers, and overall scalability and stability of the platform. That's where the LOS vendor plays a role. And then you as a lender, you worry about everything else. And that everything else really just comes down to UI and UX. And in fact, in this sort of a layout, you could sort of piecemeal it, right? You could choose to maybe build your own UI UX on just the originator side, maybe the processor side, and then just use the vendor's modules for the rest of it. Or you could sort of phase it out so that at the end of the day you end up with your own LOS, okay, with your own sort of system that is custom built for your specific workflow, but again, is sitting on top of a core database, a core infrastructure that enables this LOS to function. So at the end of the day, you as the lender, you're really focusing on this whole concept of usability, comfort, workflow. And again, it satisfies that need. And again, we're not saying even to the extent that any given lender is going to build the best UI. It's up to them. I mean, it's about giving lenders that option of choice. And if you think about, most from a software development standpoint, this is where all the core costs are, right? This is where it gets very heavy. This area here in building out your own UI, it's much less expensive. Requires much less technical skills. And in fact, you think about, there are so many different third-party vendors that could even sort of develop that on your behalf with your input. So as an LOS vendor, if we were to equate this back to the automotive world, we're the guys who are building the engine, building the chassis. For you guys as lenders, you're building the bodywork. Right? You're creating that sleek shape that fits exactly what you need. And so together, with us building the chassis and the engine, you building the overall body, I mean, this is what you could build. A completely crazy, wacky looking car, but it's built specifically to your design. So the question is, does this actually exist? Okay, am I just, talking pipe dream here or not? And, I can say with confidence, yes, it does. Okay, now is it a fully modularized LOS that we are offering? No. This is, what I'm talking about is sort of future state, obviously, but we've proven that this can actually be done. And these point of sale vendors, I'm sure you guys know a lot of these different companies. This is a great example of how an API is utilized to present a custom layer to the end user. And in this case, the end user, that being of the borrower. But let's not forget, a lot of these different point of sale vendors, they offer their own, a lot of times, loan officer tools. Okay, to the extent that a loan officer could conceivably live entirely within these point of sale vendor environments and never have to touch our actual LOS. And the reason that could happen is because of APIs. I've talked about this before, but we feel that we're somewhat unique in our approach to APIs because we've been doing APIs for a long time. Many people don't know this, but the overall LendingQB LOS was built entirely on an API framework. When we first built the system, we relied entirely on these third-party vendors to really add in different services that needed to be bolted onto the overall LOS, such as things like document generation. That was all handled using our core API framework. And within that framework, what we've done, if we isolate just a point of sale system as an example, beyond just saying, hey, this is a point of sale, it's a loan application taker, so what we really need to only worry about is just exchanging, say, 1003 data from the point of sale into the LOS. But to really create this as a fully modularized sort of API model, you can see all of the different functionality that we've included in our API. So things such as not only the loan application data, but exchanging bidirectionally updates to the actual loan application itself. So in effect, as other users, let's take this example. A loan application is taken from a point of sale, goes into LendingQB. As a processor, the underwriter, shipper, closer, as they change data on the loan file, as they update the loan status, we're able to push that data back to the third-party point of sale. Okay, so that's one connection point, right? Here are some examples of functionality that's available within our API. Ordering credit reports, that's a very key thing, right? When you look at the ability to order a credit report and determine the initial disposition of any given borrower from a credit standpoint, sure, there are certain point of sale vendors that, independent of the LOS, can go out and pull in the credit report. The disadvantage there is that credit report data is initially stored in the point of sale system. It is not in the LOS yet. And as we know, we kind of want to, as an LOS system provider, we want to centralize all that data. So by exposing credit report ordering within the API, that means that point of sale can go into the LOS, order the credit report, bring all the credit report data back into the LOS first before pushing it out to the point of sale. And that end user either being the borrower or the loan officer. Some additional functionality, being able to run Fannie DODU, being able to do document exchange. Obviously, from a point of sale standpoint, you want to capture documents. You want to be able to have those documents ready to be able to clear your conditions. So we included that in our API. We included the capability to run our pricing engine, automated conditions, generate initial disclosures, and even CDs, and additional service ordering such as appraisals. So it's critical to have an API that exposes those capabilities, be it at the originator level, the processor level, the underwriter level, right? And then that's where that's the trick to this, right? To allowing lenders to build their own LOS is making sure that the APIs give you the proper functionality to be able to do that in this sort of remote fashion. So here's a good example, right? This is our very plain Jane, out of the box consumer portal that we as LendingQB, this is what we provide to our clients. It's pretty standard, right? All the functionality that I mentioned here is in our point of sale, but visually, workflow-wise, maybe it's not ideal for any one of our given lenders. Okay, this is Simple Nexus. This is the same exact screen, except they've accessed it via the API, and they're presenting it to the end user in their particular format. Again, this is us. This is Simple Nexus. Here, this is Maxwell. Same exact screen, right? Except it's in a completely different format. And we're not saying that Maxwell or Simple Nexus are better than each other or anyone else. We're just saying these are different ways that you can expose the data, that you can provide functionality, that you can provide a way for a user to interact. We know that we have several of the other clients. They have built their own point of sale system. So they're not using, one of these guys that I mentioned, right? They built their own. We have at least 6 or 7 different clients that have done that themselves. So it is possible, right? Even as a lender, to go out and retain the resources to build your own point of sale, build your own originator module, build your own other types of modules utilizing our APIs. Another area where we're seeing a lot of activity with our clients are the TPO portals, right? So many of our clients are wholesale or correspondent lenders. And, whereas we have our default TPO portal, several of our clients have gone out and built their own TPO portal using our APIs as a base. Okay, I wish I could show it to you because some of these guys look really good, but they are proprietary to our clients. So, I was not authorized to show it. But again, that's another area where you can see that this modular concept and then extending the modular concept out to custom modules really can come into play. So thinking about this, it's easy to think and say, oh, this is really cool. I hope that my LOS vendor lets me do this. And hopefully I'm also showing you guys, yes, we have the capability of exposing this such that our clients or third-party vendors could actually utilize our APIs. What's important to understand is there are some fundamental differences between different LOS vendors, and that really foundation matters more than anything else, okay? And when we're talking foundation from a software, an LOS platform standpoint, what we're talking about is database architecture, network security, API framework, and very importantly, documentation. Okay, it's one thing to have all of these things, right? You've got a good database that you can layer your own custom sort of interface on top of, and make sure that it's keeping all your data safe, and it has the framework and the capability to expose the features that you want within your custom platform. But this is a key barrier that we're seeing, and we're even experiencing ourselves. If the documentation is not there, if it's not easy for a third-party developer to understand what functions or what fields are available, that can really extend the time and the cost it takes to actually build any sort of custom UI project. So documentation is very key, and that's an area that we are investing quite heavily into to make sure that it's easy for third parties, be it a vendor or a lender, to be able to access our APIs and have our APIs do exactly what they want and they expect a function to do. Because at the end of the day, you guys, all LOSs are functionally equivalent, right? I mean, if they weren't functionally equivalent, no one would be using it, right? It's, you look at this picture, a hammer is a hammer is a hammer, right? The real question is, how well does your LOS, how well can it extend? How easy is it for you to not only bolt on different services or different types of products to the LOS, but let's start thinking about extending it out to these custom UIs, right? Because, to us, we see that as a key step to finding that fundamental sort of Kaizen-like type of advantage to your process. Not just a simple matter of, eliminating bodies or, having robots come in and replace bodies. We're just saying fundamentally, allowing you to have complete control over your UI UX environment and improve the overall process for all your users. Because at the end of the day, who really knows the future of LOS technology? Is it like a flying car, right? Is it something that's just people talk about it, but is just really not feasible and just kind of mythical? Or is it, really just, a bunch of robots, right, that are able to come in and to automate a lot of processes and eliminate, some of the manual labor and the manual costs that you have to spend to be able to achieve your process improvement goals. So again, we're not saying that modularity is the only future for LOS technology. We believe it can be, and from a LendingQB standpoint, this is the strategic path that we are taking. We believe that modularizing the overall LOS into these individual components that are optimized for each role-based user, that is one way of being able to achieve better improvement. And from our standpoint, we're really designing our software to accommodate that type of environment. Because, Lord knows, nothing is more frustrating than going to your LOS vendor and asking them to do something that would improve your process, but having the LOS vendor come back to you and basically say this: I'm afraid I just can't do that. So understanding your LOS, understanding your processes, and really planning for the future, purchasing or considering a switch to an LOS, simply for some surface level feature may be sort of mitigating the overall progress that you can make, right? So really understanding the foundational technology that an LOS vendor is providing to you and whether you can truly build and grow off of that or not. That to us is really sort of the larger deciding factor when it comes to considering a new LOS, which we know that a lot of lenders are doing right now. So with that, I did want to sort of finish this webinar. I know it was very sort of high-level conceptual. Many of you on this webinar are our clients, so this does sort of serve for you guys as our clients, sort of a visionary path in terms of where we intend to go with our platform. But for those of you that are not a client, and if you have any other questions about, what LendingQB plans to do in this area and what our vision is, I want to extend the opportunity for you to email me. Here's my email address if you have any questions.